There's this expression, you don't change Bitcoin, Bitcoin changes you. And we've talked a lot about how Bitcoin changes you, but I think that may be a frightening statement to some people. It's like, oh no, how is it going to change me? And Bitcoin doesn't actually change you. Bitcoin gives you the freedom to be your true self.
Bitcoin is imposing this new rule set on our civilization. It's forcing cooperation. And the people who fight against it, in some ways, there's like economic Darwinism taking place. It's like a state change in our reality. I like to think about the BB world and the AB world. In 2009, the fundamentals of this reality changed, and we have this new rule set that's being imposed upon us. And you get rewarded by aligning with it, and you get punished by going against it.
Don't make Bitcoin the God in your life. But now I'm realizing more that it's a tool, and it's a tool for humanity. But really, the most important stuff is the love, and it is the connections with people.
It's like almost outsourcing your faith in some sense. Like, I have faith in this monetary protocol, and my space on that ledger that represents my economic energy is protected. And now I'm like empowered, and I'm responsible. I'm sovereign. I'm independent from like all of the distortion, the deceit, the corruption in the world.
Bitcoin is this tremendous reuniter. And I don't think we've ever had anything like that before, because in the past, unification efforts have been military conquests, which aren't voluntary. Bitcoin's incorruptibility means that it can survive for much longer than other empires or nation states did. Like, they always fall apart because the leadership becomes corrupt. Bitcoin solves that problem by having no leadership.
If you're enjoying the show, it would mean a lot to me if you had hit subscribe and leave a quick rating or review. It helps more people find these conversations and support the mission. This episode is brought to you by Stampseed, the premium solution for backing up your Bitcoin seed phrase. Paper won't last, SSDs can fail, and most steel options aren't built to survive real-world threats. Stampseed uses high-grade titanium and a precise low-tech stamping method that just works. Get 15% off with the code BTCSTORY at checkout. Mark your calendar as BTC Prague 2025, the highest signal Bitcoin-only conference in Europe, is happening from June 19th to the 21st. I'll be there speaking, and I'd love to see you there too. Plan your trip to Europe's Bitcoin capital and grab your tickets with a 10% discount using code BTCSTORY. And if you need help getting your Bitcoin off exchanges and into self-custody, or if you're ready to build a robust, bespoke inheritance plan, the Become Unruggable one-on-one consulting program, where you will work exclusively with me, is exactly what you're looking for. You can find all the ways to reach out to me in the show notes down below. Now, let's get started with today's episode. Welcome to the launch of our new roundtable series called Proof of Thought. This is where we go beyond just Bitcoin as money or technology and explore how it connects to our deeper values, beliefs, and even spiritual frameworks. In this first episode of Proof of Thought, the theme is Bitcoin and spirituality. I'm joined by three amazing guests who each bring a unique perspectives to this conversation. Let me take a few moments to introduce them. First, we have Loren HODL. Raised in a Mennonite community, Loren has journeyed through the diverse careers and countries, shaping a unique worldview rooted in truth, connection, and of course, Bitcoin. Next up, we have Eric V. Stacks. Eric is no new guest on the show. This is his third appearance. And for those of you who are listening to this show for the first time, Eric is a Bitcoin advocate and cannabis farmer who's incredibly optimistic about the long-term implications of Bitcoin. And finally, but not least, we have Tomer Strolight joining us. A Bitcoin enthusiast since 2013, Tomer is the editor-in-chief at Swan.com and a writer for Bitcoin Magazine, and also the creator of the incredible film, which is called Bitcoin is Generational Wealth. And to top it off, he's also the author of another incredible book called Why Bitcoin. Each of our guests bring a rich and diverse perspectives to today's topic, and I'm excited to dive into this conversation with them. How are you gentlemen doing today?
Wonderful, thank you.
Awesome.
Happy to be
I
here.
see it. Everyone's on a positive note, so I guess let's dive into the spiritual rabbit hole. So to open it up, let's start with something foundational. So Bitcoin seems to demand a certain mindset, right? And that'd be discipline, patience, low time preference, almost like a spiritual practice. It's not just money, it's honestly a mindset. So how have you noticed in ways that Bitcoin has influenced your behavior, mindset, or habits in ways that feel spiritual? You know, do you see an overlap between Bitcoin and spiritual practice? Whoever wants to go first can jump for it.
Okay, I'll jump. It's almost like everyone's sitting on bated breath. For me, it's been like almost a 12-year, I guess a 12-year journey now. It was sometime in April of 2013 that I first heard about Bitcoin, and it has been like a deliverance arc or redemption arc. You know, there are many things in this world that I held as ideals that I wanted to be true and naively thought they were true when I first, say, graduated from university and entered the workforce. Things like if you work hard, you'll get well rewarded, and those who merit increases in authority will be granted increases in authority, and free markets will play out, and the best shall win. And I ended it. And that was true for an early part of my career, but the higher I rose through corporate ranks and the closer I got to the CEO's offices and the bankers doing their big deals, the more and more I became disillusioned about what I fundamentally believed ought to be true and right. And I saw CEOs do incompetent jobs, cost people hundreds of thousands of jobs, and then walk away with pay packages that rewarded them handsomely for their ineptitude. I saw the banks in 2008 completely destroy the housing market, costing people their homes and their livelihoods, and get rewarded with rich bonuses. And I just felt, wow, something's gone really wrong somewhere. And I was a fool for believing this, and threw me into I think a bout of depression. And then I discovered Bitcoin in 2013. And here was a system that was incorruptible, that was fair, that was transparent, that was honest to not to a fault, but to perfection. And it reinvigorated within me that hope, that not even the hope, the conviction that such a system could exist, where corruption wouldn't take over, where people who played the games while other people did the work outsmarted the people who did the work, because those people were busy working and not figuring out how to play games. And so it restored my faith and hope in humanity, in civilization. It redeemed what I believed was true and brought it forth. And so then the next 10 years of my life, 12 years of my life, were all spent understanding this and promoting it and trying to get people to understand that these valid, just, optimistic, hopeful ideals actually now exist in the world, and they've been concretized in a system that delivers that to us. And so that to me is a very spiritual experience. I had all sorts of spiritual experiences throughout it, but it was, in one sense, it restored my spirit and it restored it not through reestablishing my ignorance and naivete that I first held these ideals with, but by a system that is incorruptible, indestructible, and doesn't rely on your faith in other human beings, but restores your faith in human beings who subscribe to the system and understand it and endorse it. So maybe that's a bit of a long introductory comment about how Bitcoin is spiritual to me, but this was a huge arc for me and redeliverance to a hopeful, optimistic individual.
I love it. And
Yeah,
I think
that's fantastic. Here, I'll jump in here since I'm next on the frame.
For sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Eric.
For me, I discovered Bitcoin in 2017 when I was like a month away from being licensed by the state of California from a cannabis farm. And I had been going through kind of a spiritual journey, and I don't know what came first. If you think about how we could potentially be creators and projecting this simulated reality that we're experiencing, I kind of like to think about life through the lens of simulation theory. But there was the discovery of Bitcoin and a deeper understanding of spirituality happened in the same time. And I was kind of fighting a nihilistic feeling, a feeling of hopelessness, where I kind of felt like, I could see intuitively that the the economy and like wealth acquisition practices, I suppose you could say, definitely had negative second and third order effects. And the discovery of Bitcoin, especially after being a cannabis producer or a commodity producer for so long, I was very well primed to understand the magnitude of a money that effectively, because money essentially has infinite demand on it, paired with true scarcity, and then this incorruptible monetary protocol that would impose fiscal responsibility upon people. And then further thinking about it and traveling down the rabbit hole, that nihilistic feeling that I had been grappling with, and I think we all could relate to that, really was killed based upon the fact that I've come to believe that Bitcoin over time will reward the honest market participants as opposed to the dishonest ones. And I think that there's alignment there, parallels between like religion and spirituality and Bitcoin in that sense, where we're all, I think our default mode of operating in the world is to be kind, compassionate, and sharing. But at some point, when you're pushed against the wall and you're in a position of survival, like there's a breaking point, and I think that breaking point is in all of us. And I think it's really easy to be judgmental of like people who are committing crimes. I think that some of that is really predicated upon them attempting to survive. And so this monetary system that can't be corrupted or co-opted by the sociopaths who have like a long history of what I like to call scumbaggery, skirting that line of ethics to serve their self-interest, like they're running into this impermeable wall of truth that we can all adhere to. And then kind of circling back and lastly to the idea of like, Tesla famously said, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, vibration, and frequency. And I have been personally trying to figure out how to manifest a higher quality of life experience for myself. And many, many years ago, like I discovered, The Secret. I watched The Secret a long time, the idea of the law of attraction. And I heard someone say that the law of attraction is your vibrational frequency being mirrored to you in the world around you. And I really like that description. And what I think is very profound about Bitcoin, and in some ways, quite literally at first, it's like an ideology that has no distortion. It's pure signal, the node, that list of transactions, those 21 million units that are being transacted amongst each other. It's the same list. And so the clarity that I think comes from everybody adhering to this agreement in some ways that like the economic trade is all happening in a way that we can all agree on. I think that has an effect on how we're vibrating, and it's bringing us into an alignment in a way that is more profound than religion, because in religion you have all these different versions of the same kind of ideology and there's a little bit of distortion there. So I think that it's very parallel. Bitcoin's I think it's divine in quite literally every way. It's like the merging of the physical world with the metaphysical world, and it has been a catalyst for me to like really go more inward. I think that's like where there's so much understanding or like the information that we need to try to figure out how to live a better life. And then lastly, it's like the easiest thing ever to leverage, to be excited about and be grateful about. And I do think that if you want to, elicit love and gratitude and compassion from the world, you need to exude that. And Bitcoin in a lot of ways is like a cheat code for that. And it's been definitely profound and very impactful for me and my spiritual journey, you could say, in life. But yeah, that's kind of a jumbled thought there, but it's been deep and profound. I'm still grappling with it every day.
Hey, Gigi, can we maybe even take a step back further and maybe each of us define what spirituality means to them?
No,
Just
you
as
answer your question. Don't try to evade.
No, I plan on answering the question, but when I use the word in what I'm going to say, I just want the context around, because even the word God or the word whatever means something different in everybody's mind,
Or
Sure.
religion.
I mean,
How many times do we hear people saying,
Yeah.
is Bitcoin a religion?
Yep.
Yes or no? So yeah, go ahead.
For sure.
Definitions. All
Definitions.
right, Loren, so define spirituality.
Well, to me, I just have to go so generic on some of these things, because to me, spirituality is the invisible world, or the world that we can't define using scientific method or our five senses, and it definitely exists. I think if you deny, like, you have all these people saying there's no God and there's no, blah blah blah, and it's all just your hormones and they just have all these illogical explanations for things. And so I think it's tough to deny that it exists, but to me it's just that realm, and it's basically what you put your faith into, and faith being the thing that you can't prove also by those techniques. And yes, I believe that there are elements to it of God, of the things that Eric is pointing towards, and whatnot. But yeah, to me, that's kind of it in a nutshell, even though it's not a really well defined definition of it. But yeah, I'm curious to see what the other panelists have to say.
Oh, so we're defining it. I'm very much in a similar camp to you. I think the spiritual, at least at the very least, is the non-material, right? And we can go further from there. It's the emotional, the ephemeral, the invisible, but not the non-existent. Like I definitely have I have a spirit, right? Sometimes my spirit is joyous, sometimes my spirit is down, and that's an intangible thing, but it definitely exists. You can all experience it, and I experience it. So I think that's this spiritual thing, and I tried to actually the I think the most popular essay I've ever written that's also been made into a movie called "The Legendary Treasure of Satoshi Nakamoto" was actually originally called "Bitcoin is Spiritual Awakening," and the opening chapter of that essay and movie is still called "Bitcoin is Spiritual Awakening," and it talks about why Bitcoin creates a spiritual awakening for people. I won't go into it at this exact moment because you still have to answer the question, and
I
Eric
do.
has to provide a definition. We might come back around to it, but for others, you can watch the movie if we don't get back to it.
Yeah, so spirituality, that's an interesting one. Actually I was thinking about Googling it, and I didn't get to it yesterday to read just, what the Webster's definition of spirituality. But for me, I think spirit like, when I hear that, I think of spirit as source energy, as the underlying energy that flows through this whole reality and makes this reality up. And I think about that as being like a fractal of God's source energy, this limitless being, energy, creation, whatever, that is limitless and eternal. And to be complete, it has to be able to manifest and experience limitation. And I think that we're all an expression of God energy, like in fractals. I think we're a fractal of source energy that is that source energy has like done intentionally to experience limitation. And then the idea of spirituality is being able to align with that understanding, or at the very least seek out deeper understanding of what it is that's going on here. There is clearly, like a an understanding that we have a soul, or a consciousness, you could say, that is separate from the physical body. And that's like, for religions for thousands and thousands of years have tried to explain this, and there's a lot of parallels in all of these religious stories. And so for me, spirituality is the journey, or the idea of trying to understand what exactly is happening, because there's some things that are seemingly kind of obvious that are very hard to understand and explain. Yeah, so I think that's the short answer there.
Okay, Gigi, I'll go with my my answer to the question. Kind of similar to Tomer in that you pointed out that I was raised in church, primarily the Mennonite church, but I was involved in other denominations as well, Pentecostal, Baptist. I went to an Alliance Bible school. I studied psychology. I've made a ton of mistakes because I think I've always been seeking. And in that seeking, I've made those mistakes which have cost me a lot of pain and suffering. And in that pain and suffering, I went through a lot of existential crises where I was seeking truth. I was seeking purpose. I was seeking meaning. I didn't buy into the religious answer. I didn't buy into the answers I learned in psychology. And so for me, throughout all that process, I think that the meaning for me was like, why am I here? Whatnot. I didn't understand money or the value keeping system that it represents, and whatnot. And similarly to what Eric is saying, like, I don't know, just getting back to my church fundamentals, I think I don't really buy into a lot of what some of these mega churches are preaching today. And I kind of faded away from my upbringing and went off on a tangent of, just self-pleasing and whatnot in this whole process. And I think one of the things Bitcoin has done for me, it's given me the foundation from which I can go seek that stuff. Like, hey, what is this all about? And so it really wasn't until the point that I got into Bitcoin that and established that actual foundation that it actually led me on the voyage to and honestly a lot of my thinking has kind of diverted back to where what I was taught. But it's weird because I actually like hang up on certain verses as opposed to what I've heard from the pulpit and whatnot. So like I don't subscribe necessarily to one particular theology, or even, like, I'm super intrigued by the stuff Eric says. But one thing about this topic is, because we can't prove it through science or anything else, it's kind of ridiculous to beat each other over the head with it. And it's like we should instead have these conversations in ways that is more respectful. And oftentimes I find even in politics and religion and a lot of these things end up in big rows. But for me, the spirituality that I've really come to peace with is a little bit eclectic, in that, I find one of the verses in the Bible that kept me grounded through some of the insane periods of my life where I was just losing my mind, trying drugs, just doing crazy stuff, was God is love. And the part of love that I have experienced in my life couldn't have come from humanism or a bang or a lot of these other things. Like, it just didn't make sense. So that part of spirituality to me, which was love, kept me grounded. Later on, even parts of the Bible where it talks about free will, like being created in the image of God, with free will, I realized that without free will, you can't truly love. Like, all of this stuff ties together, even to the stuff that Eric is saying. Like, in the beginning was the Word. Like, the Word is so powerful. The Word is the most powerful thing, even in today's era of insanity and false narratives. It's the words that people are believing, and the Word is vibrations. You know what I mean? So in a way, this stuff all ties together. And thankfully, Bitcoin was the foundation that led me on the journey of like discovery. And I define discovery as being at peace with God. And however, like, Eric has a different definition than Tomer of what God is even. And for me, that peace is really all I've been looking for like the happiness and the sense of belonging and purpose and all of that stuff, which really was the quest that I was on, which is a spiritual quest. Because in church, they taught me, your spirituality is your soul is your mind, will, and emotions. Like, I just was, just being spoon fed all this stuff. And I think it really took me to have this journey on my own to like follow and find this peace within myself. So I think it's a spiritual journey. The end.
I love it.
But you know what's cool is like, Eric and I have these amazing conversations. Like, I think we've talked 2 weekends in a row, and we'll go deep on this spirituality stuff. And I'm just super intrigued. We don't see eye to eye, but there's so much truth in what he's saying, and I've never really shoved down his throat like my belief systems and what I think is, the reason for it all. But it's just, I love the fact that we can actually have these intense conversations, because it seems like a lot of people that are caught in a rat race where they're just trying to pay the next mortgage bill, trying to get the kids to soccer, they don't even have time to have these thoughts, so it's super amazing to have these kinds of conversations on the side with, like-minded folks. So appreciate you, Eric.
Yeah, you too, man. And then I wanted to add something in, and this is a thought, but maybe a question. I kind of feel like the difference, because as I'm listening to this conversation unfold, there is some sort of a difference that I'm trying to wrap my mind around between religion and spirituality. And it seems, and the first thing that comes to mind is religion is like a centralized, prescribed ideology, and spirituality is more of like, I don't know, in some sense, like the free will or like of a collective group of people who are trying to come to an understanding or a consensus. And it's more of a decentralized ideology or thought process as opposed to a centralized and a centrally controlled one. I think about how the church used to, before the printing press, the church was in charge of the information. They would be, basically prescribing what information that they wanted to the people in their jurisdiction or whatever. And so there was a lot of control there. And there seems to be, that's not present in spirituality when I think about that term.
Right. Well, there is no Bible of spirituality, or
Uh-huh.
but there's a sacred text of every religion, and I think that's what you're describing is like for all three of us who've talked about our journey, our journey, which I think is the word that you even used, it's a personal journey. We didn't sign up and go on a bus our whole lives with another group of people and take the same thing. I went down a rabbit hole of studying philosophy deeply during some of my years of turmoil, which led me down a certain direction, which then, I was able to use to help understand Bitcoin, which ended up taking me in a different direction than what I thought the philosophy had taught me. So it is a self-guided spirituality is a self-guided journey, and you might end up in a ditch, you might end up in a bad place, but if your intent is to continually discover the good, even if you're making mistakes along the way, you can redeem yourself, right? I think that's the second time I've used the term redemption, right? You can find redemption by staying on the path of trying to find the high road, the road of truth. And it's I think for many of us, it's a journey where we're pushing the limits of truth. What do we know, right? Like science can prove that gravity exists, but it doesn't tell you why you're here. It doesn't it doesn't answer any of those deep questions. And spirituality is this journey to try to answer that question, but you can't use science to answer it, right? Like science takes us to, well, there's chemicals in your brain and they spurt, and we see that coinciding with emotion. So you're just a chemical reaction. That doesn't tell you, that doesn't provide a satisfactory answer to the question of why we're here, or what we're meant to do, or any of those deep spiritual questions. And I don't think it proves that they're stupid questions to ask. I think you have to get into a state of denial of what you experience firsthand to say, well, that's really all there is. We're just deterministic ping pong balls bouncing off of tables, and there's nothing more to it than that.
Well said, man. 100%. Yeah. I sign off on that one. Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah,
No,
there's an
I
element
agree.
of sovereignty and taking responsibility and self-ownership, and Bitcoin really empowers you to do so, and that seems to have a ripple effect into the spiritual realm or spiritual thought process in my experience as well.
All of those things tie to other scriptures like, being created in the image of God, which is the ability to be creative, like to do art, to create things. I think
Yeah.
without the ability to do these things, like that requires free will. We're set up in a world that is governed by rules, and humanity is decided that, flip the middle finger off to whatever entity or however these rules were set up initially in the beginning of time. And that's not going to work long term, so it plays into what Eric was just saying, like, responsibility. You are a self entity that's autonomous unto your own, that is responsible, and the need to be responsible. And that ties right back down to Bitcoin's proof of work, so there's so many fascinating topics and whatnot. Like I like Eric digging into the vibrations and stuff, and studies have been done for a long time about good vibes. We hear that term, and it actually comes from science, where they're actually studying, like, when your mind is focused on positive things, you beget more positivity, and conversely, when you focus on the negative, that's what you get more of. And Eric was referring to The Secret. I had a ex that was big in on that, and I'm not opposed to any of this stuff, but I just think it's very cool. Like, to me, all this stuff is very intriguing and interesting, because it does, to me, point to a spiritual world, stuff that is very hard for us to put our fingers on. I live really close to these big listening towers that they're these giant satellite dishes that are pointed up towards space, and we're listening to space, but like space is a vacuum, and so we can't have actual vibrations coming through. So we're listening for, like, different waves, microwaves, and other things that can travel through space and whatnot, because we as humans are curious about this. We're trying to figure out if how big the universe is it really expanding like we're told that it is it just this weird shape thing? Like, all of these things are all connected with, to me, with spirituality. And like, another thing that Eric was talking about was the simulation theory that he goes by. And I mean, for me, it's not hard for my mind to slip between, like, a creator, which a lot of us refer to as God, And if you are in a simulation, it was also made by a creator. So however you want to define this, I think sometimes we're just splitting hairs when we're actually talking about the same thing, because our little pea brains can't comprehend a lot of this thing. It's like the limitations of time and all these other things, when and like predetermination and all this other stuff. Like, it doesn't matter when our little pea brain is trying to put everything into the little boxes that make sense to us. You throw it all out the window, man, because it doesn't matter when these factors aren't in the equation. It's like it just makes us look even dumber than we really are. I don't know what I was saying just then, but I really was excited by what Eric was talking about.
Your spirit took over and it just let it rip.
Yeah.
Straight from the heart.
I get super excited just hearing like different people that think about similar things than I do, because you just can't go down the road and talk to the local whoever, because they're going to just look at you like you're insane. And so to me, it's just like when people start spewing this info out, I'm super intrigued and I just want to dive in deeper, and I get all excited and jump around and say, woohoo, say more, Eric, because this excites me.
Yeah, one of the things that I thought of while you're talking, though, is it's like the cause and effect, the Newtonian model seems to be disrupted, or it's becoming clear that it's incomplete or entirely wrong. I don't really know. But with the idea of quantum physics, we do have scientists quite literally, proving that at the very least, the observer has an effect on physical reality. And so that's really interesting and kind of profound. Your consciousness and the energy that you flow through your body and through your brain can have an effect on physical reality. And that is something too that I really take very seriously, because that means that at the very least, like, it's another level of being responsible. It's like life is happening for you, not to you. And if like you can take total ownership of your life experiences, at the very least, you remove yourself from that victim mentality, and it's very empowering. And also, if you can go through life, and I try to do this, it's a practice. I've gotten much better at it the longer I've been doing it, is I don't look at anything that's happened to me in my life as bad. Like, there are unfavorable circumstances for sure that we experience. And I think maybe that's part of the duality of life. You have to have bitter to have sweet. But if you can look at any bad thing that happens to you short of you dying with that lens of gratitude, like, okay, I have to have problems in life, I'm grateful for this. And then what's the opportunity for that? Like, the screen wasn't, my camera wasn't showing up on Tomer's screen. So instead of getting all flustered, he's like, oh, I'm just going to solve the problem. It was like acceptance. I'm going to accept this issue, and then we're going to just simply move through it. And that's acceptance. I think love at the deepest level is acceptance. And I think resistance is predicated upon like fear. And if you distill every decision down in your life to the most fundamental basics, like kind of like binary, you either have love or fear. And so, yeah, I don't know. I kind of lost my train of thought there.
Where I kind of want to take the conversation, and I'm going to bring it back to Bitcoin, is we started living in societies where the tribe leader spoke the truth, or the church in a bigger nation spoke the truth, and then we had this fragmentation of information that allowed us to each go down this own spiritual journey, and we're all in very different places, right? Look, that's not to say we disagree about everything, but there are people that we've talked about who aren't present on this call who view the world as deterministic, and that we discovered science, the scientific method, and it explained a lot, right? Like, and it allowed us to invent many things. We're able to have this conversation, even though we're in 4 different places in the world, thanks to our knowledge and understanding of atoms and electrons and bits and all this kind of stuff. But we got to this point where we made science a religion, and there were people who said anything outside of science is sacrilege. You can't believe in the spiritual. And the reason I wanted to bring it back to Bitcoin at this exact point in the argument is Bitcoin welcomes all, right? From the extreme religion to the extreme atheist, we can all agree that it works, and that it leads to the same consensus view that Eric was speaking about before. We're all in agreement about it, right? We may disagree about anything and everything else. Do you put ketchup on French fries? How do you need your steak cooked? Everything else we can disagree on. And this is one thing we can all agree on. If we can agree on when its genesis was, what was in its genesis, and its entire history since that moment of genesis until until the present. And so it's this incredibly reuniting force. Like, we went through this disunification of humanity as we were each able to take our own path, and we all ended up in different places, and it brings us back to the same place. And that is a really powerful spiritual idea. Like, there's a lot of people who still have to come to Bitcoin, so they're not in the same place with respect to that, at least to this, but they know, like, just about everybody in the world knows that this thing exists. And they may have heard that there's something about consensus with it. So sooner or later, they're going to take a look, and they're going to at least see that we're all in the same place together, even if they hate it, right? Like, the people who hate Bitcoin the most seem to spend a lot of time on it. And I bet you Peter Schiff knows that everybody who runs Bitcoin is in consensus about the exact balances of every Bitcoin address.
Yeah, I think even in relationships, like husband and wife, whatever relationships, your friends, when you focus on the things you don't agree on, you get more of that. Just like we were talking about, the vibes and your
More
thought
resistance
patterns and whatnot. And yeah, exactly. And so, bang on, Tomer. I totally agree with that. And then even going back to something Eric said, I think what's her name had the song that said it best. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That was a joke. But no, I honestly agree with that as well, Eric, because I've had some times that I've described, and like even in multiple divorces where it was like horrendous, like the pain and everything else. But from that, like you said, like I know what good is in that situation now. Like I know, my current relationship is so good because the other one was so bad. So it's like you said. So I totally agree with that. And then focusing on the things we do, like Eric and I don't see eye to eye on everything, but because of Bitcoin, we are united, and we are, at one in this, and we can start thinking about more complex things without getting at each other's throats too. So we can stay in that positive space and that loving space. And I think that's one of the things that's the message I want to portray to the world is the love and focusing on the good, and focusing on bridging the gaps that divide people instead of focusing on the negative stuff that keeps them divided. And I think it's important to bring people into the fold of Bitcoin by doing this. So I think that's the primary message that I want to give. That's why I struggle with the whole, like, oh, you're a shitcoiner, GF, have fun staying poor. I struggle with that because that's not the message that I want to portray. There's caveats to that, of course, like maliciousness and whatnot, but but still, if you're operating in ignorance or whatever
That's
else,
the negative reinforcement piece.
Yes.
Before
Yes. Absolutely. So anyway, I'll shut up because I know we're all talkers. We could probably all fill this space up, but I want to be considerate of others here.
I wanted to just jump in based on a lot of things that were spoken on this last point on.
Gigi, what have we answered? One question so far out of your 10 questions. We're at number 1.
Don't worry, we had 4 points, but we can break it into a 4-part series. If anything.
Got you.
I go with the flow. I'm not a strict to the schedule type of guy, but I wanted to kind of chip in on this agreement point that we talked about. In a sense, we have this global consensus, which, if I'm not mistaken, we've never had that in the history of humanity. We've never had every single human kind of agreeing.
It was impossible before.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It was impossible before to have a sense of global consensus that everyone arrives at essentially at the same time. But let's say it takes 10 minutes for the whole world to come to agreement on this thing every time it changes. Like, wow. It used to take a year to go halfway around the world to send a message there. So it was impossible. But now, we didn't have the technology to get halfway around the world.
Yeah.
So forget all that. But wow, this whole thing that everyone agrees on every 10 minutes, profound, even if it's only just a ledger of entries. But
it's the most important element of our civilization. It's the money. It's the lifeblood of our economy. It's our time and energy in an abstracted form that we use to trade with each other. And being able to agree upon that, because it's so important. I mean, I think everybody agrees the sun goes down, the sun goes up. So there's other forms of consensus that don't have the same level of impact that consensus around the money does.
I went to Norway last summer and the sun did not go down.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a good point.
That's true.
But Gigi, you asked me a question. 3 of us interrupted you.
Yeah.
No, we can go with the flow. No, I was going to say, also touching upon a little bit on that religious topic, going to what I just said, kind of this global consensus. It doesn't matter if you're Muslim, if you're Orthodox, if you're Christian, we kind of share this one thing in common, which I think is super important where we find ourselves in the world today with the global crisis that's going around, this whole separation between families, religious states, politics, like society as we know it, where we should be flourishing and living in the golden age, we're kind of fighting each other over this ideological stupidity that's just being forced upon us. And now here, thanks to Satoshi, there's this beam of light where we can just point our focus on, and we just eradicate all of that noise and we focus on the good. And that interflows with the love aspect, which I think at the end of the day, we as humans are all here to love each other. If we look at other animals, it's all about caring for each other, supporting each other, and just having a loving life. Because at the end of the day, to me, the most important thing as well is love. There's nothing more I would want to do in my life than spend it with my children and my wife. And that's something that Bitcoin gives me, this kind of this opportunity to exit the matrix and focus on, the things that are really important to me.
So, I mean, this is a really, this is another facet, I think, an expansion on the point that I was trying to make. Like, Bitcoin unites all people who follow Bitcoin towards consensus and agreement and dealing peacefully with each other, right? Like, as I believe in Bitcoin and Eric has Bitcoin and I want to get some of Eric's Bitcoin, I got to do something that he mutually consents to sending me some Bitcoin, and there's mutual consent, and which is love, right? Like it's not he's going to want something that I have to give to him. He's going to give me something that I want from him. There's a mutual exchange that's voluntary between us, and so much of the rest of the world is trying to divide people, get them on one side or another, deceive people, get something from them, under a belief of something that isn't true, that they're going to get something in return that they're actually not going to get in return, or that they, whatever the cause of the fraud is. So we've got these opposing forces that you can get on, and I think why Bitcoin is winning so much and winning so many people over is this exact spiritual point. It's directing people towards togetherness. It's directing people towards voluntary, mutually consensual conduct with one another, which paves the way for love and other peaceful types of relationships. And so I think Bitcoin being a peaceful movement, and this is why there's so many interesting theories about what Bitcoin is for nation states or for militaries. And I think that anytime that they move away from the recognition that it's uniting people, they're erring in their judgment, and they're going off track because they're so caught up in the history of the world, which is a history of wars and battles and divisiveness and fragmentation and fracturing. And we've discussed many of those things already here. Bitcoin is this tremendous reuniter. And I don't think we've ever had anything like that before, because in the past, unification efforts have been military conquest, which aren't voluntary. It's like, I'm coming into your territory with a strong army and I'll rape and kill you if you don't surrender and submit. That's not exactly voluntary, and it doesn't create enduring structures. I think also the other point I'd make really quickly, I know others want to speak, is like Bitcoin's incorruptibility means that it can survive for much longer than other empires or nation states did. Like, they always fall apart because the leadership becomes corrupt. Bitcoin solves that problem by having no leadership. And so you don't have the fallibility of the human being at the top of the thing, or a bunch of corrupt humans at the top of the thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
That kind of speaks to like the collective will of the people, which almost is a spiritual type entity in and of itself, because when we live in a society that, I referred to earlier as narrative controlled, where they're, saying anything, making up false data to control the narrative, they're controlling the collective will of the people, and they're controlling it in all sorts of aspects. I mean, look what happened during COVID, where we all lost our minds. They control it with the financial system, like, oh no, things are fine. Look we tweaked this algorithm, made things look good for you here. And so to me, I think that's probably, I don't know, we're probably close to an apex of actually the only thing missing for me when it came to Bitcoin was the acceptance of the collective will of the people around the whole world. And once that happened, like it was done, game, set, match, Bitcoin wins. And I think if we're not over that hump, we're close. And I think that is one of the things controlled by society, like the rulers, the 1%ers, the people at the top of this crazy financial scam, house of cards, however you want to define it. is they're able to control the word, they control the media, they control, science now, because they're tweaking science even to push that narrative on people and control the collective will, the psyche of humanity at large. So I think that's another thing that Bitcoin can do. And I think until we have a point where we're on a Bitcoin standard, where we actually are seeking truth and what is in the best interest of humanity going forward versus what's in the best interest of the few at the top of that, it will be harder to even answer some of these questions that we're posing in this little forum, which is, addressing our spirituality and why we're here, and love and all the other stuff, because they're gonna just keep putting the pressure on us for, paying that next bill, doing the next thing, and we'll just be little pawns in their bigger game.
Yeah, and I want to add something in there that I was thinking real quick, that when Tomer was talking, is what's very fascinating and profound when I think about it is Bitcoin is imposing this new rule set on our civilization. It's forcing cooperation, and the people who fight against it, in some ways, there's like economic Darwinism taking place. It's like a state change in our reality. I like to think about the BB world and the AB world. In 2009, the fundamentals of this reality changed, and we have this new rule set that's being imposed upon us, and you get rewarded by aligning with it, and you get punished by going against it.
I wrote BB the other day in a post or something. I think that's funny that you said it before Bitcoin.
I've heard somebody else, a few people say it recently. I don't know. I probably didn't coin it, but I hadn't heard anybody say it.
Yeah, no, it's cool.
You didn't IP that, Eric? No. That's
I don't know.
All open source.
Yeah.
All open source, that's right. I wanted to chip in also on the word aspect, right? Like how word really controls our lives. And what most people forget about is that it starts super early on through education, right? Education's also been corrupted, nutrition and so forth. But education to me is super vital, because we feed our innocent, beautiful children to this corrupt system where they get programmed at the youngest age. And no wonder nobody knows, if you ask someone on the street what is money, they can't explain it, or how to operate with money, because that stuff is fully not taught in schools. And forget about that. You're taught about finish with good grades, go to good college, get a good job, work your ass off for 50 years, retire, you die, life is over. But there's so much more to life than this kind of concept of school, work, retirement, and you die. At the end of the day, all of us growing up, we all wanted to be, I don't know, a fireman, an astronaut, whatever it was, but we couldn't pursue it because we were forced upon following the curriculum. But now we have this opportunity. May that be also with homeschooling. I mean, I had a really deep discussion with Daniel Prince on this, and everybody knows his kind of case study on that. But I'm going through this same shift with my kids, which are 5 and 3 years old. They're preschool, but I'm really thinking, do I really want to force them down this whole brainwashing aspect, instead of me really focusing, taking them around the world and exploring it as it was in the pre-days before this traditional schooling? Because I think as parents, it's vital for anyone listening is to kind of show your kids the right path of life and be the right example at the youngest age if we want to change the world. Trying to convert now someone that's 50, 60 years old. Sure.
Yeah.
Let
me raise a dilemma. I think there's two dilemmas, and you have to explain the first one to get to the second one. The first one is, I think in the Bitcoin community in particular, there's a lot of awareness and awakenedness that there's wrong things and wrong thing, but there's a leap to, and I know the right thing, right? And the truth is, you know what's false, but that doesn't give you, like, I know that I'm not a gorilla, but that doesn't mean that I know what being a human being means. Right. And so I think, like, we know that there's falsehoods, but we don't necessarily know the truth. And then people quickly, as happens everywhere else, people step in and they've got the answer. This is who killed Kennedy, and this is what caused 9/11, and this is who's behind the vaccines, and you end up with all of these explanations that aren't provable. And so there's bound to be some measure of error in them. They're not scientific. They're suspicion based. Right. And it's not, the suspicion comes with good cause, because it was clear that the people who fed us the official story were lying. We don't know where the lies came from. So this gets me to the second thing, which is the dilemma of educating your kids, knowing that you don't know the answer, right? That you don't have all the answer. When the kid says, "Where, does God exist?" You don't know how to define God necessarily. You can say, I believe this through my experience and this and that. You can have a conversation with them, but it's important to have that humility. And the reason I describe it as a dilemma is, as a parent, you want to give your children answers. You want to know the answers for them. You want to give them good guidance. But where the humility comes in is that the best guidance you can give them is, we don't know this yet, right? And this is so different from the world that I grew up in was a world where we had all the answers. Science had discovered how the exact size and age of the universe, the molecule, the atom, how life worked, everything. We had answers for everything. I was convinced as a kid that immortality would exist by the time my parents got to. I would never have to see my parents die because science would solve the problem of death. And it hasn't gotten anywhere close to it. So I think that this is where we have to attune to the vibration of what we're calling Bitcoin, right? Like in Bitcoin, we know with certainty and precision and flawlessness the past. It's the record unlike any other. We don't know when the next block is going to be found. We don't know what transactions are going to be in it. We don't know what the block hash will be like. And we don't know, of the 256 bits that are in the block hash, we don't know what any one of those 256 bits will be. We know there'll be a 0 or 1, but we don't know what any one of them. Well, I mean, we know that the proof of work requires that there's a number of leading zeros, but we don't know what the nonce will be like. So it gives us this certainty of knowledge of the past and humility about the knowledge of the future. And we combine within Bitcoin this, I know something and I know that I don't know something else. And there's a humility and an acceptance of that. And I think that's how we need to raise our kids, right? Not, I've got all the answers. I've got the right religion. You're so fortunate that you were born to me because I've got all the answers and I'm going to teach them to you. It's like, you're fortunate that you were born to me because I at least admit that I don't know the answers to everything. And I believe I've got the answers to some things, but everything I tell you is what I believe based off of my experience. And I may be wrong because it turned out a lot of people were wrong about a lot of things in the past.
I love that.
That actually ties.
Thank you for sharing.
Ties exactly what Eric was saying earlier as well, when he was saying, being okay with not knowing everything, and just what was the term you used, Eric, when you talked about that? Yes, thank you. Acceptance. Yeah. No, beautifully tied in. I mean, that's like a theme here: love, acceptance, humility. It's beautiful. Spirituality.
So should we switch? Should we jump on to the next tangent, or we want to keep on going deeper on this one? Well, it aligns. It just goes deeper on the current one. So I guess taking it deeper, kind of focusing more on the personal and internal aspect. So Bitcoin often, right, starts as a curiosity and then becomes more kind of a mirror to yourself, mirroring what are your flaws, how can you improve yourself, your life, your decisions. So from that perspective, everything changes for us, right? Like how we relate to the work that we do every day, the money that we spend, the time that we allocate to different things. How has Bitcoin changed your kind of sense of meaning and purpose? And has it shifted your relationship with your own ego? So I'll let whoever wants to jump on that one first.
I nominate Tomer.
I was going to pause and let someone else go first. Yeah. But if everyone else took a step backwards.
Eric, you want to go help out Tomer? We can shift it to
I can jump
Eric.
in there. What was it? I was just thinking. I think that for me personally, there's like a distillation or a collapsing. I don't know. Quantum physics comes to mind. The double slit experiment. The observer is what causes the wave to collapse into a particle, and there is this element of like navigating through life, and everything is kind of in flux. I mean, quite literally, like you can't really measure the value of, let's say, for example, a house in dollar terms. You get an accurate understanding of what that is. You now need to factor in M2, or the total amount of monetary units within the system. So to complete that understanding, you need to complete the algebraic equation. And so there's a distortion, there's a lack of clarity. And Bitcoin being clear and indisputable and fixed in supply brings this element of like, I don't know, something that you can depend on, you can lean on. It's like ideological. Like I know that with a high level of certainty that the coins that I own are mine, right? And and my percentage of the 21 million is fixed. And so for me, that's like, it's like almost outsourcing your faith in some sense. Like, I have faith in this monetary protocol, and my space on that ledger that represents my economic energy is protected. And then, like, I kind of get to outsource that faith and that belief a little bit, but then it also elicits like a deep level of like responsibility. Now I'm like empowered and I'm responsible. I'm sovereign. I'm independent from like all of the distortion, the deceit, the corruption in the world. Yeah, so there's something kind of powerful there, and I kind of forgot what the original question was, but
Well,
yeah,
I
that's like
think
the first thing that comes
you
to mind.
answered a lot of it, and I do want to jump in and build off of it. Yeah,
Sure.
like I think you don't exist independent of your environment, right? Like you reflect into your environment reflects on you. You cope with the environment as you perceive it, and I think for me at least, once I discovered Bitcoin and understood it, I was able to react and be in a different environment than I was in the fiat environment, right? This allowed me the option. It didn't force me. It didn't drag me in uncontrollably. It opened the door to me and it said, if you want to step in here and you want to step out, you can step out anytime you want. You can straddle anytime you want. So it's this door that opens to a different environment, an environment in which theft and money printing and deceit and all these things that Eric was talking about don't exist in that realm. They're prevented from occurring, right? Like you can't, it's not that you can double spend and then a judge rules, oh, you double spent, we're going to undo it, right? So you commit a murder and then the judge punishes you for committing the crime. You can't commit the crime in Bitcoin. In Bitcoin, you can't double spend. You can't pass off a block without the proof of work. Everything is judged before it is accepted to have occurred. And so it's this incredible world in which you have these assurances that these bad things, it's not all bad things, but these certain bad things won't happen. And when you can live in that world, you can act in a different manner. You don't have to protect yourself from these bad things happening. And so that allows you to deal with other people and your environment differently. It allows a different part of you to come out, a part of you that maybe when, in my case, when you were a naive child, you let come out all the time. And then you realize you've got to keep it in because people take advantage of you. There are people who would prey on that. But now you can do it in a world where that's not a concern of yours and everybody else is exhibiting the same characteristics. So it really allows you to flourish. And I think that's, so it's not that Bitcoin affects me in isolation. It creates an environment for me to be able to be a different person than I would have to have been absent Bitcoin with other people. Like Bitcoin isn't like Bitcoin and me, if we're the only two existents in the world, Bitcoin's of no value to me. Bitcoin's only of value to me when other people exist in the world who accept Bitcoin and understand Bitcoin and want to mutually trade with me.
I agree with what these two gents are saying. For me, I think one of my messages too is don't make Bitcoin the God in your life. Because I kind of think I was there because I was so excited when I found it. I had that moment, and I mentioned it earlier where it was a solid foundation for me. But now I'm realizing more that it's a tool, and it's a tool for humanity. But really, the most important stuff is the love, and it is the connections with people, and it is that stuff. But we've never had a tool like this. So for a while, I think that's when, I was extremely toxic as well, is when I thought I was defending like the religion or whatever else instead of realizing that it's just math and energy and time and, the most important stuff. But really, like, and it's important we all do that. But at the same point, it's also important to realize the most important stuff is your time and love and the good stuff, and that Bitcoin's just a tool. And I think that's just part of the journey that I was on. But with that, and with what I said earlier about establishing that foundation from which I could go do this other exploration and whatnot, there is a lot of things about myself that I realize and still am realizing that, I've been a complete asshole a lot of the time, like I had issues with ego. Like even now, like there's just really dumb little things like getting angry, swearing too much. Like I have a big, like my wife could list 100 things wrong with me right now, and it sucks
My
because
wife lists 110.
yeah, exactly. So I mean, it sucks a lot because I don't want to be that person, and I know some of these faults, but that doesn't mean it makes it easier to hit them. But just being aware and being conscientious of this stuff, to me, is it's a step. I mean, in psychology, I think I forgot how the saying goes, but it's until you realize you have a problem, you can't fix it. So knowing that I am these ways and realizing I need to take humility pills and whatnot all the time, and I definitely think that, you know, the foundation of Bitcoin was a big, point of my life. Before Bitcoin, really, I was egocentric and definitely living to just satiate my worldly desires, really. I mean, that was pretty much it for many years for me. But yeah, it's been a part of the journey. But Bitcoin was a significant part of that, that stepping stone. Because when I got into Bitcoin, it was for completely selfish reasons. I wanted to make more money. US dollars is what I thought money was. So it's been a journey, and it's been somewhat embarrassing at times, because I was, that a-hole even in the Bitcoin community, talking
Well,
crap to
Loren,
people. And yeah.
I really like to people who are listening to this. I really want to stress again, one of the aspects of of finding Bitcoin, like finding religion, is you may become a bit an asshole first, right? You've got all these answers that other people
Yeah.
don't. You're better than them. They don't know shit. You know everything,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And you really only can achieve like the best results, like the best things that come from
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin is when you let go of the arrogance that you
Yep.
now have
Yeah.
established for yourself, and find the humility
Yes.
to admit what you don't actually know, and to
Yeah.
accept that it's okay to not have an answer to every single
You
thing.
know what's funny, Tomer, too, is I can think of names of other people on X and stuff that I've kind of watched their progression and their journey, just going
Towards
through the same
humility.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not going to mention any names out loud, but it's just and I would unfollow these people and stuff, and then like a year or two later they would swing back into things, and I was just like, oh no, here I'm just getting ready to get T-boned, and they've completely changed, and I was just like, holy cow, are you kidding me? And so there's a lot of people on that journey, and it's like, I love it because it's
Yeah.
reveals a lot about yourself,
Yeah, no, we may get to a point where people say Bitcoiners are the least toxic people in the world, but you go through this, this discovery of the thing,
Yep.
and then you've got all the answers, and
Yeah.
shitcoiners are a scammer, and
Uh-huh.
and then
And
and
when
then
you
you,
reach points where, like you talked about being humble, when you have that humility, it's so much easier to learn and to find the truth, because you're not trying to guard that ego. You know
yeah,
what I mean? And so it's just like, yeah, come at me, because you're not going to get anything. I'm not going to give you what you're looking for, which is all this negative
yeah,
emotion back to you. So,
yeah.
and which ties into what we were talking about with those vibes and the negativity in your own mind and
I think
whatnot. So,
also, one of the things that really biases a person and makes it hard for them to think neutrally, humbly, objectively is when their wealth or livelihood
mm-hmm.
is tied into that
Yep.
thing. Right? There's
Yep.
that famous
Yeah.
saying, I think Mark
100%.
Twain, it's very hard to teach a man something that he's paid not to understand, right? To get a man
Yes.
to understand something that he's paid not to. And we all have these conflicts of interest. If we have a job, we don't want to hear that our employer is crooked or a thief or not, or even
Yep.
imperfect, right? And
Yep.
so these defense mechanisms spin up. I think the nice thing about, and so as Bitcoiners, we're all prone to saying no, and we find that before we find complete comfort and confidence in Bitcoin, it's like, well, no, your coin's a shit coin. And
Mm-hmm.
we come up with all these rationalizations
Yep.
and things, and many of them are valid. So it's like it's a valid thought process, but it also comes from a defensive place rather than from a neutral, humble place. To me at least, what happens after you spend enough time studying Bitcoin is you find peace with it. You understand how it works. You understand its strengths. You understand its limitations.
Mm-hmm.
You're impressed with its strengths because it's unbreakable, uncorruptible. It's got all these incredible strengths, and so you can live at peace with those things
Mm-hmm.
without having to shoot for more. And I personally find myself in Twitter X Spaces now, like trying to tell people to come. Like, you don't need to convince everybody that tomorrow America is going to abandon the dollar and adopt Bitcoin as its unit of currency, and so will the
Yes, you
whole world.
do. It's all gonna burn down, Tomer.
Yeah, look, you have Bitcoin as it is, and that's enough. And now you can listen to these ideas about what's going
Mm-hmm.
to happen with a strategic reserve or a bit bond or this or that, and you can listen
Mm-hmm.
to them with neutrality, not where you've got
Yep.
so much at stake that you need the answer. You need the answer to be something rather than what it is. Right?
Yeah,
You're putting the what you want to be true, what you need to be true, above the what actually is true. And
for
so, like,
sure.
that's a big part of the process, and that's very common I'm not immune to it. I didn't go straight from hearing about Bitcoin to humility. Believe me,
Mm-hmm.
I went through the same arc as lots of other people. But I think getting, and I probably still have a ways to go. If we do
Me
this
too.
again in a year, I'll be, oh my God, I can't believe how arrogant, hubristic I was when we first
Mm-hmm.
appeared and had this conversation,
Yep.
talking about knowing about being humble. So
No, you know
I
what's
know that I
funny
don't
too,
know how
Tomer,
to
is
where
yeah,
I'm at.
100%, man. I totally agree with everything you just said. It kind of triggered some of my exes too, because their whole sense of identity was wrapped up in like their physical appearance, their fake body parts and their fake hair and it is so much because when like what's going to happen when they grow old, or if something happened in them where they got disfigured or something, because really everything about that was their whole sense of self, and so they had to protect that whole sense of ego, and that's kind of who I was. That's who I would chase after and stuff. And I even married a couple of these kind of folks, and just because that's what I was taught too. It's like, hey, this will make you happy. Like if you're seeking happiness and fulfillment, like you want fake boobs, you want blah blah blah, here's your list, go get it. And it's like, okay, I
Because
did
it's a
it, I'm not
mirror,
happy.
right?
What's
You were looking at
right?
them and kind of thinking,
Yeah,
this is what
Exactly.
I need. This
Yep.
is what makes me happy.
Yep.
I
Exactly.
want to jump in and complete my thought after listening to those two beautiful expressions. Bitcoin seems to expose your belief sets. And I think that hubris and that righteousness that we experience first or commonly when you discover Bitcoin, you're like, hey, I believe in this thing, and this thing is so fucking right relative to every other thing that you believe in.
Mm-hmm.
But the further you go down the rabbit hole, you realize that, at least for me and what I've seen in other people who have traversed the Bitcoin rabbit hole, is that it exposes beliefs that are coming maybe from the physical mind that are out of alignment with the belief set of the higher mind, and that's that dissonance, or the dissonance between, I think, for me, when I'm going through life and I experience fear or anxiety or whatever, what I'm trying to do now is find the difference between what is anxiety and what is excitement, right? And I think that we filter our energy through our belief set. And if you have a feeling that is like disruptive, it's an indicator that your belief and your programmed belief is out of alignment with like that higher mind, divine consciousness, or that soul, or whatever that you're a part of, or you embody. And Bitcoin, for some reason, really exposes those limiting beliefs, or those beliefs that you're out of alignment with. And then for me too, like when I first discovered Bitcoin, and I see a lot of people, it's almost like the first solid ground you can stand on ideologically. It's like, oh, hey, here's this fixed, incorruptible protocol, and I can tether myself to it. And then now that you have this constant in a world which is full of seemingly nothing but variables, you can now like stop and reflect and take a breath and like, okay, what does it all mean? And that ego death that comes along with like, getting rid of the cognitive dissonance, your incentives, like Tomer's saying, when you're, it's hard to accept the fact that your boss is doing something that's bad if your income is tethered to a belief that you have. So disrupting those beliefs is part of that process, and that ego death, and moving through that cognitive dissonance. And I feel like the people that are in Bitcoin that have the most signal and say the most profound things to me are also embodying a real depth of like humility. Like Jeff Booth is a good example. I really love listening to Jeff Booth speak. But it definitely just it exposes whatever your belief sets are. I had to go through a little bit of a personal grappling with this idea of limitation or scarcity. It's like I put capital that I had set aside into Bitcoin so that I could move out of the area that I live in, because I knew that I was going to many, many years ago. And the time has now come. And I'm like, oh my God, I got to sell some fucking Bitcoin. Well, what is Bitcoin for? Am I going to take it to my grave? Like, you could have all the Bitcoin in the world. Like, it is money. It's a conduit to channel through the economy, through the hands of other people, to get what you want out of this reality. And so, I had to kind of really think deeply about, why do I have this Bitcoin, and am I willing to let go of it, and what am I willing to let go of it for? And that's kind of reflected back to me in this mirror-like way, beliefs that I had that were out of alignment. I believe abundance is simply your ability to do what you need to do when you need to do it. And we kind of outsource this power, or these I don't know, this idea that like the things that we need are outside of us. And I think really Bitcoin exposes the fact that what we need is really coming from inside of us, and a trust and a knowing that we're, navigating through this life in an attempt to create the most high quality, joyous experience. And so for me, Bitcoin has mirrored all of these limiting beliefs that I have that, or had that were out of alignment. And so that's been very transformative.
Yeah, I think part of what you're describing, we started this by saying that Bitcoin is a spiritual journey for us, and when we're getting to the point of recognizing, you know what, there's a lot of commonality in the many spiritual journeys that people have in Bitcoin, and some people seem to pause along the way. Maybe some people get derailed for a bit. Some people lose their minds and become deranged, and get them back, and some don't get them back. But it's this continuous journey, and I think, at least for those of us here, we see that it is a journey towards increasing knowledge through this paradoxical point of view of first acknowledging what knowledge we don't have and don't know, and not being greedy for a monopoly of knowledge, or what's the word I'm looking for? Uh, just having complete knowledge of everything, being completely wise about it, and saying, there's things we'll never know, and there's things we will potentially find out if we put enough work in it and have the success, right? Like you can work on mining and not ever find a block, right? And you can try to find the answer to some question in quantum physics and put your whole life's work into it and not find the answer, but you might find the answer, but you certainly won't find it if you don't put in the work. Right. And like, these are all lessons that once you understand how Bitcoin works and its methodology, you can really apply them. The metaphor works. It holds up to just about everything else. You might get lucky really early on. It might be quick, but it might take you a lifetime of work to get something done. And that's part of the uncertainty of what you don't know. There's no guarantees in life, right? And like, there's so much that we can learn from the way this thing works, that it fuels that journey. And once your curiosity gets set on to Bitcoin, it's hard to learn only Bitcoin and not get other life lessons from it as well.
I couldn't agree more. Just to chip in, kind of, to me personally, based on what we just spoken about, kind of on the learning aspect, what shifted in my sense pre-Bitcoin, it was always you either win or you lose. There's kind of no middle ground. But the deeper I go into kind of my own Bitcoin rabbit hole in my journey, I've shifted to where it's either you win or you learn. There is no losing part. You kind of, every bad experience that happens with it, you learn of it and you try not to fuck up again on it. And I think that's something that the pre-coiners miss out on. It's always this win-lose. Oh, there's a bad outcome. It's terrible. Why did I do this? Kind of this negative aspect to it. So I think that's also another important part that I'm experiencing, where I take everything, literally everything, with a pinch of salt. If things don't work out, well, it was supposed to be that way. And I think that's something, like, I wouldn't come to that mindset without Bitcoin. It's fascinating.
Can I tell you why I think that's so prevalent in Bitcoin? Because almost every Bitcoin journey early on in it contains a big lose, which is a big learn, right? Almost everybody has less Bitcoin now than when they started. Because you bought some Bitcoin, did something stupid, bought a shitcoin, you tried to mine, you did this, you tried to beat Bitcoin, and you were humble, right? And so, like, both the lesson, and you either say, that's it, enough for me, I'm done with Bitcoin, or you say, wow, that was a valuable lesson. I'm going to try to see if I can rebuild my original stack and get back to where I was, which also most people never manage to get to. But that is, like, you have to, again, accept, right? There's this acceptance that was a lesson, an expensive lesson, but a really valuable lesson, because you're not going to let go of your other Bitcoin all that easily ever again, without thinking about it. So, like, what many of these journeys have in common, and why is that true of Bitcoin but not everything else, right? Because Bitcoin is really scarce and only comes to those who work for it. So it mirrors reality. And in the fiat world, all these illusions exist where there is no losing. You can rationalize this, a loss is bad, a gain is good. What did you do at the end of trading today, right? Day traders, like, you close out your balance and did you gain or did you lose?
What's your P&L?
Today was a good, never. What did you learn today? Never, ever.
Yeah.
Possibly say what you learned today. So.
Yeah, you know what? Another thing too, Tomer, that I think is so wild, with traders and just the fiat world at large is when you're most commonly, and maybe there's exceptions to this, I'm not sure, but it seems that most often when you're winning in the fiat world, it's coming at the expense of someone else.
Yeah.
And what's beautiful
100%.
with Bitcoin is it aligns the interest of the individual with the interest of the collective. And that's really profound. And a lot of people will try to implement their fiat zero-sum tactics in the Bitcoin realm. And they fuck, as they say on the streets, you fuck around, you find out. And so Bitcoin is like a great teacher in that way. And yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people that have, and including myself, when I first got into Bitcoin, there was like, I don't know, a couple times I was like, oh, I'll sell it and I'll buy it a little bit lower. I'll buy these kind of alts. And really quickly you realize like, wait a second, this is too big of a deal. If this thing's for real and there's only 21 million forever, like you better just adhere to that. It seems like that's the best approach. Like the simple strategy is the best strategy now, which is also deeply relieving, where it's like, oh my gosh, I could just like, it's like, as Forrest Gump says, it's just he was like, Mama, we don't have to worry about money anymore. And he's like, she's like, oh, I guess it's just one less thing. It's like, yeah, we'll check that off the list. Like that's a big relief. I could go and focus on other things now, as opposed to being like an interest rate arbitrage specialist or a little mini personal hedge fund manager to just try to preserve my economic energy.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's very liberating and in so many ways. Like, hey, one and done. Here it is. This is the monetary protocol I adhere to. I put my surplus in that and I just move forward and focus on other things now.
Listeners, pay attention to what Eric just said. How many of you are trying to figure out how to beat Bitcoin with your options derivative strategies right now? For God's sake.
Gosh, I think we're going to see a lot of people blow up in the future. I think we're going to see some ETFs blow up, and this goes to the thing that I said like originally in the beginning of the conversation that I think is so profound is Bitcoin punishes dishonesty and it rewards honesty. As an example, if any of these ETFs or let's say Coinbase, if they they're not fully reserved, in time they'll be exposed, and our ability to expose that dishonesty is so tremendous now relative to the way it was in the past. Like part of what softened my disdain for the corruption in the world is I've kind of come to the understanding, or I've adopted the belief set that there wasn't a better way. We had physical property. In order for the global economy to scale, it had to centralize and it needed a derivative system. Certificates become dollars, etc., because of the physicality of property. And as that's centralizing, that's a co-optable honeypot, and the central bankers that collude with governments or kings or whatever and prevent that dishonesty from being exposed through like a bank run. It's like a runaway train of dishonesty. It's like dishonesty is like a hard fork of reality. And now you have to maintain this chain, and it's very energetically dilutive. And now anybody with a node can deny a false transaction. And, going back to like the ETFs, if BlackRock or any of the providers show proof of reserves, they're going to likely have an advantage in the marketplace over the ones that don't. And so, in going to kind of tying it into this mirror idea, it mirrors and it exposes to the world and at least yourself what you got going on. Are you honest or are you dishonest? Are you providing, value and getting reward in a consensual way, or are you trying to corrupt, And I think that corruption, and it's like I kind of call it like the game theoretic fuckness. In the BB world, the dishonest market participant had the advantage. And I think that's all why we're all so broken inside pre-Bitcoin. We're just like, fuck, it just feels like, nice guys finish last, as they say. And then so Bitcoin inverts that. And I find that to be quite empowering and inspiring.
We know what the title of Eric's book is going to be now.
Yeah, what's that?
Game theoretic fuckness.
Game theoretic fuckness, yeah.
I wanted to add
and then the violence, Go ahead.
No, finish your thought, Eric.
Well, it's just like part of that game theoretic fuckness that I think is really problematic is the physicality of property incentivizes violence. If you have something I want and I'm like, hey, you know what, give it to me. And you're like, no, I'm not sure. And I'm a sociopath. If I don't care, I just kill you and take it. The incentive is actually to do so. So if I can't get into your Bitcoin, as they say on the streets, I better come correct. I better offer you up something you want so that you would willingly give up some of your life force to exchange for that. And that's just that great imposition. It's like imposing fiscal responsibility and fair trade amongst our whole civilization. And that has it's so fun to think about. The long-term effects of that are so profound. And like, I remember the first time I saw Bitcoin is generational wealth, Tomer. Dude, I'm literally just fucking shedding tears. I'm crying in my living room. My wife comes in. She's like, what's going on? I'm like, what? You got to see this. This is so fucking good.
Yeah. Thank
Anyways.
you. It's I've written a few things that make people cry, and they make me cry first when I write them. But the way that thing came together was just divine.
So good.
A very spiritual experience for me as well.
I was going to say with going kind of with the fakery of the legacy markets, and kind of as Eric said, the nice guy always finishes last. This kind of term that was used a lot, kind of fake it till you make it, where you kind of just bluff in a way until you get to some level. That cannot be applied in the Bitcoin ecosystem, because you cannot fake it. You need to provide the value. And going back to what Tomer brought up a few points in this conversation, kind of the value aspect is so radically different to the legacy world that we have today, where it's a bunch of rent seekers, may that be the stockbrokers and sitting in fancy Wall Street offices, doing absolutely nothing, picking up phones and selling stock options, and basically making millions, billions of dollars from giving zero value. At the end of the day, it's this whole sum game of someone wins, someone loses. Mm-hmm. And with Bitcoin, everybody, once they find themselves, if you don't provide value, your real proof of work, no Bitcoiner is gonna kind of separate from their stack to give you some sats for that. So Bitcoin not just makes you kind of in a more comfortable and safe place, but actually it pushes people to be more productive and give the world something of value, which I think is super important.
There's a very spiritual thing here at this point, and Knut van Hoom says your Bitcoin is a part of you, right? And in that sense, you just said it, like that only I can separate my Bitcoin from me, right? Like that no one else can, no force in the world can do it, right? The most powerful computer, the most powerful military, they can kill me and kill my Bitcoin with me, but they can't separate it from me. Only I can separate it from me. And when I separate it from me, what happens? Like, I give a part of me to you, which becomes a part of you. That's a very spiritual idea, right? An inseparable part of me, an indivisible part of me becomes divided because I chose to divide it and give it to you. That's not something we can do with anything else in the world. It's not something we can do. It's not even something we can really do with love. So it's another one of these really powerful concepts, and it's subliminal. It's behind the scenes when we do it, but every time I exchange Bitcoin with somebody, we become bonded in some way. I just Bitcoin to Eric Kaysen because we're sharing a Airbnb at the conference, and he accepted Bitcoin, and something that was otherwise inseparable from me, I volunteered to sever and send to him, which is now unseverable to him. And there's something so profoundly spiritual in that, right? Like the bond between two people who transact Bitcoin is like a blood bond, right? It's even more. It's a blood oath. It's a Bitcoin oath. It's an unbreakable oath that will be enforced by all the power, more power than the human species is capable of generating. That's profound.
Bitcoin DNA, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe, because we're all exchanging energy, like even in this conversation, like there's energy being exchanged and it's going back and forth. And so we live in an energy in, energy out world. And so I'm going to tie what you just said as far as like you're sending, part of your life force to Eric Kaysen. There's something very magical about that. I think it might be because Bitcoin is thermodynamically sound, and pre-Bitcoin, there was nothing that you could save your life force in, if you think about it in terms of a battery that wasn't bleeding energy, which I think kind of it incentivizes continuous extraction from the marketplace. It's the incentive that, drives people to become rent seekers, because we want to be able to, exert the least energy to get the most energy back. And so when you can encapsulate your time and energy in an abstracted form into a vessel that's not bleeding energy, it makes it more meaningful when you're trading it, because there's no incentive for you to get rid of it. That hot potato dynamic, like Bitcoin's the final trade. If you own a bunch of houses, like there's dilution, you might want to sell some of those houses to buy houses somewhere else or whatever. I think that there's a whole like culmination or collage of these different forces that makes that so special. And I also felt like what you described, Tomer, I'm experiencing in some ways myself as I have, started traveling and now I'm about to move. Like I'm deploying capital, this energy that had like static or a toxicity in it, and it's gone into Bitcoin. And I feel like, and this is super woo-woo and metaphysical, and I could never prove this in any way whatsoever. This is just how it feels. But it feels like it's been transmuted and it's been changed into this very loving, powerful, magical form. And I feel like the things that the capital is now being deployed against or to go and do has like a whole different feeling associated with it.
No, you dumped the coin of the empire of lies in exchange for the coin of the empire of truth and voluntary exchange.
Yep.
No wonder
Totally.
you feel
Yeah, it's a fucking baptism.
Yeah.
For sure.
Fucking baptism.
Yeah.
I guess the listeners have no idea they're going to get baptized on this episode. But
they're not just going to get baptized. They're going to get fucking baptized.
Wow.
Oh.
This has been a profound conversation, guys. Like,
good one.
This is,
Indeed.
I
Agreed.
I've had a lot of podcasts where it's kind of one-on-one talking about spirituality, but when you actually get a collective together and you focus on this topic, I learned things, even things that I said that I didn't know that I knew. Or thoughts that I hadn't had. And certainly it was inspired by hearing these other guys and yourself.
There's
speak.
a lot of thoughts that Eric said that I know I didn't know until he said them.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm just channeling information that I gather from the outside world that I agree with, and maybe I kind of put my own little, it's like a collage of like the things that I align with, and I believe them to be true. But one of the things that I really, and this kind of ties into like Bitcoin and the humility, is like I have strong beliefs held very loosely. Like at any point, at any time, information could enter my sphere, and like my entire belief set would have to change. And I think that that's something that I don't even know if it has like to do with like if you're Bitcoin kind of makes you more malleable in that sense, because you have this thing that's so rigid and fixed and solid that you can tether yourself to, then it's like okay to be more malleable and more fluid, which seems to make, at least for me personally, I can flow through life much more easily and much more joyfully. And I think that that's the most important part is like to be able to enjoy your experience here. And kind of one of the reasons that I used to do a little bit of this, I was definitely not high on the charts as far as like spitting vitriol at the fiat world or, the crypto world, because I think that like, and Booth says this, like, if you're just yelling at clown world, you're strengthening it. You're enforcing that energy where attention goes, energy flows. So it's like, I try to focus on the things that I want. I like to be malleable and humble, but I have a strong belief set. But so it's like very paradoxical in a lot of ways. Wild stuff.
Vibration off. But I fully agree on that point too. I'll let Loren or Tomer go in, and I don't know how everybody's doing with time. I know we allocated like 1.5 hours, which is coming up to now. So if any of the guests need to go, we can wind it down. I mean, personally, I could go on forever, but how do you guys feel? Do you want to slowly wind it up and we do another rip sometime in the future, or you want to keep going?
I don't have any time constraints, but these guys might.
I unfortunately do.
Me too. Yeah.
So, but I would love to come back and do this again.
Yeah, for sure.
Where we left off, or tackle another topic as well. Like, this has been a great dialogue. So this is not me trying to go from the conversation.
So I guess, and I respect everyone's time, I guess to round it up, kind of to do a final closing remarks, to kind of keep it short and sweet. Maybe we can just do the final rounds for each guest to kind of, what's your final takeaway that you want people that listen to this episode to leave away after finishing this episode? And I guess I'll start with Loren.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think I want to just stick with a message throughout everything that I do, even including the Bitcoin Today spaces, which we do at 8:30 Pacific time every 5 days a week, every weekday. Is love. And I think that with the caveat I mentioned earlier, because there are malicious characters out there, and it just seems like we are in a battle of good versus evil. That Bitcoin is a tool for good, for love, and really want to introduce Bitcoin to as many people as possible, because I think that a lot of things will open up in their lives, including spirituality and other things. But for me, it's love, and I'll just end it there.
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick here and add to that one. I think for me personally, I'm looking at my life and the decisions that I make as I navigate through life on the daily. I'm distilling down the belief sets. I'm filtering the energy that I'm feeling through my belief sets. And if I have something if I'm feeling anxiety or fear or excitement or whatever, I'm using that feeling to help me decide whether or not I'm coming from a place of fear or love. And it's like fear is resistance and love is acceptance. And I think that, we have to, and what you resist persists. And in order to transmute things that we don't like in the world around us, we need to accept them. And I feel like there's a lot of people within the Bitcoin community that exert an enormous amount of energy spitting vitriol at the fiat world. And in some sense, and maybe I'm totally delusional, but it at least feels good for me to believe this, like it's done. It's just a matter of time, how it goes down. Like we know what's going to happen, but not how it's going to happen, at least with a high level of probability, like such a high level of probability. I find that I have to be careful to not talk in certainties, but like it's done. And put your energy into like a world that you want to see. Because I feel like it's here. Like you could live in this beautiful, magical state of existence by focusing on what you want to see in the world and Bitcoin, and what are the implications of Bitcoin. How can you support the network? Can you have conversations, make content? Are you a developer? Are you an educator? Whatever it is. And maybe if that focus would shift a little bit from yelling at clown world to loving Bitcoin in the new world, like it is a new world. It's like a state change. It's a paradigm change. Like the fundamentals of the fabric of our reality changed in 2009 from however many lines of code Satoshi released into cyberspace. And it's here. And it's imposing a new rule set upon us. It's enforcing cooperation. And so just relish in that, bathe in that, be fucking grateful for it. Like it's the best time, as far as am concerned, to be alive ever. And as far as I know, it's the only time that I have. There's only the present, right? And so everything is here and now. That's all we have is the present. And I think that we use our minds to stack all of these images that we experience through life, like these moments in time, to create this perception of a linear timeline. But really all we could ever know is that we have the present. And so let's use that present in a way that's positive and feels good. And nobody feels good when they're fucking focused on things that are shitty, right? And like, if you want to get rid of the things that are shitty, accept the fact that they exist, and then focus on the things that feel good. So that's at least what I'm doing, and it helps me. So that's what I think.
All right. I guess I'll finish with saying, there's this expression, you don't change Bitcoin, Bitcoin changes you. And we've talked a lot about how Bitcoin changes you, but I think that may be a frightening statement to some people. It's like, oh no, how is it going to change me? And Bitcoin doesn't actually change you. Bitcoin gives you the freedom to be your true self. It allows you to emerge from this non-you that you've been by being born into a world of lies and deceit and fear and self-protection, and not exposing, not standing beautifully as who you are, but being defensive and protective because there's people who would take advantage of what you are. Bitcoin allows you to step into that at your own pace. It doesn't force you. It doesn't drag you in. It doesn't confront you. So it encourages you to have the courage to be yourself. And it gives you all the time in the world to do that. Right? Bitcoin doesn't say you've got 30 minutes to figure out who you are and then you're done. It gives you your whole lifetime to do it. And so it's this wonderful freedom, and it's a greater freedom than all these other freedoms that people talk about, because, the freedom of expression, the freedom to tell somebody that they're an idiot, good for you, right? As Eric points out, like it's just spit, but the freedom to figure out who you actually are and set aside the anger and look within and say, well, what's my true self? That's the great treasure that Bitcoin gives. And there's nothing quite like it. And I think it's a never ending journey. Like you'll probably, like I said, if we do this in a year, we'll probably come back and say we've learned a lot more about ourselves, not that we stagnated in time. Yeah. And there's wisdom. So We should do it probably sooner than that, but that's certainly in a year's time for sure.
Amazingly put. Amazingly put. I would like to thank you, all three of you, so much, Loren, Tomer, and Eric, for taking the time to come on, share your wisdom. And I think we had a fascinating conversation. I would love to keep going, but also I want to keep it concise for people to listen. So when I really show them listen to this 1.5 hour pod, it's not like pushing someone to listen to a 3-4 hour conversation. But yeah, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. And thank you for everybody listening, being part of this very special first Proof of Thought roundtable. I think this conversation shows how deep the Bitcoin rabbit hole really goes. If it resonated with you, share it with someone who is open-minded or closed-minded. Maybe it'll open up, or just starting their own Bitcoin journey. So this has been your Bitcoin story, Proof of Thought. Until next time, keep mining the mind.
Love you all, guys.